Hello, Mary. Thank you for joining me.
Mm, Absolutely. Thank you for having me on here.
It's an absolute pleasure. And congratulations on your nomination for a Stoker Award.
Yeah, that came out of nowhere, honestly. It was so great.
That's phenomenal. So,
No, it was absolutely something I was not expecting.
how did it happen? Where were you when you found out that you'd been nominated?
I was at home doom scrolling through the news. Um, and
And then
then a
you
whole
were
bunch
the news?
and then well, yeah, then a whole bunch of people started tagging me and I was like, oh, they've announced the Stokers. I want to hear it. And yeah, for some reason my name was on the list. So it was really, really wonderful because I've been following the Stokers for a few years and the middle grade category is still new. So it was definitely an honor to be included on that lineup.
That's phenomenal. And so they didn't contact you first. You found out via social media.
Yeah, so they'd been corresponding with my agent apparently back and forth, but she hadn't told me because she didn't want to get my hopes up. So I had no idea at all, which was kind of wonderful.
Yeah, that's a phenomenal way to find out, I guess. The absolute shock. Um,
Mhm.
yeah, I mean, and what led you to become a horror writer?
Honestly, I just really love the genre. Like horror is just so compulsively readable. Like the stakes are just inherent and the tension is just inherent. Like you can't have a horror book without those things. And I also just love how it kind of combines like these really sort of like fantastical, creepy things, the monsters and the ghosts and the supernatural with some quite like gritty, grounded real life stuff. And I think, especially in children's books and in middle grade, those are the books that I loved reading as a kid. I loved hearing ghost stories. I loved Goosebumps. So it just sort of seemed like the natural direction to go.
What was your first horror book? What
We very fast.
Oh God, it's a terrible question. I'm so sorry.
Well, I mean, I guess if we're going to talk about like the first book that scared me would be a picture book, which was We're Going on a Bear Hunt. And I remember being very terrified of them actually finding this bear. But I do remember, I think it was like a classic. I think it was the Goosebumps. There was the one about the mask and she couldn't get the mask off of her face. And I remember that really unsettled me as a kid.
I think my first was Say Cheese or Die.
Oh,
But
yeah.
yeah, it's strange that you say the first thing that you that were terrified by wasn't a horror book because I think my first nightmares from a movie actually came from Dumbo, the original Disney movie, when he gets drunk for the first time and starts hallucinating. Oh my word! I was
Yeah.
yeah, I was terrified. I then went and at the age of 8, I watched Hellraiser and The Fly. But no, those were fine. I had no issues with those. But Dumbo, what my word, that absolutely terrified me.
Yeah, why do adults drink at all? Is this what it feels like? Why would you do that?
Well, I must confess to some cheeky times on the dancing juice. But yes, I should have got the warning from Dumbo uh, rather than seeing it as a life plan. So, at what age did you start writing horror?
I didn't start writing horror until actually quite recently. When I started writing middle grade, I actually sort of thought I was going to be more towards the fantasy end of things. Even though I loved horror, I just didn't think it was something that I myself could write. But then after a couple of just, sort of failed books, I guess, in high school, I started writing seriously during my undergrad, and it just sort of went in that direction naturally. Even though I was trying not to do horror, I was trying to do more of a grounded fantasy type thing. It just got really creepy and weird. So I guess, yeah, sort of about that age, undergrad degree.
Yeah, I was going to be a sci-fi author, and that never happened. I My first book was a light techno thriller, and then I segued, and in everything's been horror, and barely any of it's been sci-fi horror. So yeah,
It just
you
gets
can't
you.
plan these things. I suppose you can plan these things, but it doesn't work that way in real life. You can try and plan. So if you look back to when you first started writing, what lesson would have saved you the most time and frustration?
Oh, I mean, I think writing is like inherently frustrating and time consuming. I don't think there's any trick, unfortunately, to avoiding those things entirely. But I think if I could go back and talk to my earlier writer self, it's just not getting so caught up in the perfection of it. And like, because I think I was so worried about writing, the perfect first draft and worrying about what the market was doing and, and all of these things that you can't actually control. Like, you're never going to write a perfect first draft. The market's going to move too fast no matter what you do. And it doesn't actually matter anyway. It's not real. So I think if I could just sort of like relax, enjoy the process, and also just realize that it's not a race, you have time, it would have just made the process a little bit less stressful.
Absolutely. And how did you meet your agent?
I did cold query her, but I was lucky enough that that manuscript, I went through a mentoring program, and Heather Kastner is a middle grade author who was my mentor. So she sort of helped me polish my query up, get my manuscript up to speed, and kind of walk me through what that process would look like. And she helped me put together a list of reputable agents. And Andrea Brown is just, my agency is, they represent a lot of books in the kid lit community. So it was definitely one that I had on my radar. And I was a little bit scared of Kelly at first, but she's turned out to be absolutely wonderful. So I was really, really lucky to meet her.
Oh, fantastic. It's always good to hear these stories. And what's your routine when you're writing?
Yeah, so it's a little bit flexible because I'm doing my PhD right now. So unfortunately, I also have to cut out time to write that. So generally, what I do is I come to the office in the mornings and I work on my academic stuff. And then I go home and then I work on my creative stuff because I can't do it back to back. It absolutely doesn't work. And then in the evenings, I'm also usually writing as well. But of course, that depends based on like where I am with deadlines for both things. So I'm not somebody who has like a really rigid deadline, because I find if I get stuck on one, I need to be able to kind of pivot back to the other. So I do flip flop a bit between academic and creative stuff.
Do you have multiple creative projects going at the same time, or do you focus on one like a laser?
I do have multiple. It's kind of horrible. I used to be a one project kind of person, but now I've just got so many in different stages. Like, well, I'll wait for revisions. I can't just sit. I have to start something else. So it is a bit of a juggling game, but I'm sort of getting the hang of it. Maybe.
Yeah, I can relate. I started off being one novel. That's my thing. And then no, now I've got about like 80 projects all going on at the same time. So yeah.
It just,
And do
yeah, it gets out of control.
yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And well, it works for me because it helps me sort of like continue with my main project because I can just get those distractions out of the way, and that helps, especially when you're doing short stories, because if you just get this idea, you can just like bang it out, phew, off it goes into the internet, and then you can carry on with the rest of your work.
hmm
So, and do you outline like meticulously, or do you prefer to just, are you a discovery writer?
So I used to be a discovery writer. I mean, I used to be more of what they call there's a word for it. It's
Answer?
like a lantern writer or something like so. Like the next few chapters ahead, but nothing more than that. But what sort of changed my process is just basically been being on deadline. So having, especially having a two-book deal, I basically had to give my editor a full synopsis of what my next book was going to be before I started writing, which was horrible because I'd never had to do that before. And with my third book as well, same thing. I had to give her like a full outline before I started writing. So I am a plotter, but it's been enforced. It's not natural to me.
Yeah, I can relate to that. Even though I've got a background in data and analytics, I still struggle with plotting. And the way I've had to deal with it is to have an evolving outline that sort of changes as I write and meanders and wanders off because, yeah, I have no idea what I'm writing in the very beginning, even with the best of intentions.
Yeah, no, that's me, absolutely. I do submit synopses, but they do not look like that at the end usually.
Yeah. And how do you fuel your writing? Is it with tea, coffee, soda?
It's all of the above, coffee and tea. I mean, if I had to choose, I think I am team coffee, but I do love a cuppa. So no, just constant caffeine.
Yeah, I mean, if it could be injected, that would always be an option. But yeah, no, I have to limit the amount of caffeine I have, but that also limits my productivity because I know it's a terrible excuse that many writers give, but my best stuff is written when I've got like a massive cup of coffee in front of me and I just
Yeah.
power through.
Yeah, if I'm not shaking, I'm not being productive.
Yeah, they should get that on a t-shirt.
Yep.
And what part of being an author do you find the most challenging?
Oh, I mean, I think just insecurity, and I mean that in like both senses of the word. I think it's also just this feeling always of not being good enough. Like, mentioning the Stokers earlier, like the imposter syndrome was wild there. I was like, somebody's made a mistake. There's no way. And I think constantly, there's this comparison to other people and what they've achieved and what you haven't achieved. And so this kind of eyes on your own page thing. But then I also think the insecurity of just not knowing how long you're going to be able to do this before the work dries up. I'm still very new in my career and I want to keep doing this for as long as I can. But there's always this fear behind you saying, oh my God, the sales aren't going to be good enough. They're not going to give you another book. And that is really scary. It's not really something you can ease into and relax. Um, and obviously the bad reviews hurt every now and then, but I am actually getting thick skin to that. So
Yeah.
it's all you need is one kid to say something nice, and that all of that's out the window. So
I find it's the sort of the mid-range reviews that are the worst for me. Like a one-star one, I can say, well, shouldn't have picked up the book. Come on. You
yeah.
saw the cover, you knew what you were going in for. Where's the surprise there? But it's the three-star, like I mean, it's all right. It's just not as good as the others. And I was like, excuse me, I can say that to myself. Thank you.
Yeah, God, no, I got tagged in a review calling me a disappointment, like my second book came back, and I was like, oh, you can't say that. Only my mother's allowed to say that, and even then it
Yeah.
hurts. So you can't.
Yeah. Yeah. And then you get the review saying, "Oh, this was barely scary at all," or "It was too extreme for my tastes." And it's like you two should just get together and chat to each other because there's a middle ground there.
Yeah.
And so, Eelgrass Bog was recognised by the ALA Rainbow List for queer representation. How important to you is inclusive storytelling?
I mean, it sounds like such a cliche to be like now more than ever, it's important, but it really is. It
Yeah.
really, really is. Censorship it's really taking off, especially in the States. And I know Eelgrass Bug has been sort of like soft censored in a couple of districts, so it's not been officially banned, but it has been taken off shelves,
Mm,
which is really sad. Because it's so important for kids to see themselves and all kinds of identities in stories. And I think as well, like horror is the perfect place to tell these stories because it is about, otherness and monstrosity and, how we're perceived and fears and insecurities and fighting all these insurmountable odds. Like horror is queer. And I think we need that. And we need that diversity of stories. So, as long as I can keep doing that, I absolutely will.
yeah. Ah, sorry, that big bang was my puppy has done something in the background. I've no idea, but something's collapsed. No, and I'm so grateful you do because when I was growing up as a homosexual, there was so little media. I mean, it was all out there, but I was in a Church of England school, so I could really struggle to find anything that was that I could relate to because there wasn't anything on TV at the time. There wasn't the books I found were all very heteronormative. I think the first I was at Scout Camp. No, it's not one of those stories. And I was reading a book by Ursula Le Guin. I think it was The Dispossessed, and it was the first time I'd read a book with a mention of two men sleeping with each other. And I apologize if it's not The Dispossessed. It was a very, very long time ago. But it was the first time that I read something and thought, oh, so there are other people that feel like this. It's not just me.
Mm.
And I think that as writers, it is so important that we give a voice to um, all of the sort of the whole spectrum of humanity. So yeah, much appreciated. But also, Stoker nominations, the Rainbow List, you are racking them up at a phenomenal rate. You're doing fantastically.
Yeah, it's kind of shocking. Which is it is so great. I mean, like I'm so grateful that these things actually do exist. Like I'm so glad that there is you know, an awards body for horror. And I'm so glad that things like the ALA Rainbow List exist to kind of, you know, bring queer kid lit into the forefront and stuff. And so, you know, obviously being included is a dream come true, but I'm also just so grateful for the people behind the scenes who just, you know, champion these books, and they do
Yeah.
so much work. It's so brilliant. It's such an honor.
And what do you find with middle grade fiction? How do you find it differs from more adult horror fiction?
It's a it's a really tricky one, and it's actually a question that I get quite a lot during Q&As and stuff. Is basically like, how do you know how to moderate horror for children? Like, what's too much? And you know, even writers will say, you know, well, how far can I go? Um, and I think it's sort of an impossible question because I don't think there's as much difference between adult and middle grade as people necessarily think there is. Like kids can handle a lot. Obviously, I think you have to be aware, you know, there are limits, of course, and you know, you don't try and be gratuitous and all of that. And I think I like having sort of like an extra sort of sprinkle of hope in my children's books than maybe I would if I was writing for adults, because I do want kids to kind of still leave with that sense of being able to overcome things rather than just the dread.
Yeah.
Um, and I think kids notice different things, which is also quite fun when you kind of slip on that perspective like a coat is okay, like what would a kid see? How would a kid perceive this? And you know, there's always this tension between children and stories noticing things versus what the adults in the story notice and things. And it's quite fun to sort of play that off and the horror there of you know, feeling the adults just don't get it.
Yeah. The adults not listening as well.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, yeah, kids definitely have a tough skin. I mean, I watched Hellraiser at the age of 8, and all I got out of that was becoming gay and wearing leather for the rest of my life. But
It happens.
yeah, but other than that, my sanity was fine. And how do you handle sort of social media and marketing for your books? Does the agency and publisher do most of it, or I mean, you've got quite a big social media presence on Instagram, I noticed.
I mean, comparatively, it feels really small, especially when I'm comparing it to kind of like, you know, the more popular YA authors and stuff. But you know, I'm the difference with middle grade, I think, is that my audience isn't really online. So compared to writing for adults and teenagers, where they are very much online, the middle graders aren't. So who you're really trying to reach out to is, you know, the bloggers and the librarians and sort of the gatekeepers. But one thing that I have sort of noticed is there's nothing that I can really do that would move the needle. So I think, you know, basically just doing it for fun. I'm not on the TikTok doing, you know, all this crazy marketing stuff because I don't think it would actually make that much of a push in the space that I'm in. My publisher, so I do have a publicist with Penguin that kind of set up some podcasts, and they'll kind of do, you know, a couple of marketing things, but you know, I'm not a big fish. It's not really a whole lot. But it's basically just sort of having a presence and having kind of like a platform that people can reach out to if they need to, and also just somewhere I can complain into the void about revisions.
Yeah, no, it is always good being able to vent. Um, I think the hardest part of it is knowing when to stop with the venting, uh,
Yes.
and not to go on and like an epic rant every time you look at the news, uh, which I mostly manage. But yeah,
Yeah, I have a drafts folder that's very long. It just doesn't
yeah,
get.
I bet. And what's coming up in the future? What can we expect? Oh
Yeah,
God,
so
that
my
sounds like where are you going to be in 5 years' time? Um, sorry.
yeah, no, it is quite scary. I mean, luckily this time I actually do have something coming out, so I don't have to sort of panic at that. But I was lucky enough to sell a third book as well. So I've got another middle grade horror called The Burn Beast that's going to be coming out with Penguin Young Readers in fall 2026 with the same editor. And that's about a girl who kind of goes to this remote northern town and everybody there is terrified of fire. So she kind of becomes convinced that there's something sort of very strange and supernatural going on there. So it's a bit of a mystery. It's inspired by when I lived in the north for a year teaching up there, and just, you know, the landscape and just a sense of isolation, and it's just so right for horror. So yeah, working through revisions on that now.
Oh, fantastic. That sounds brilliant. Well, thank you so much for joining us. This has been really, really interesting.
No, it's been super fun. It's always great to chat.
Okay. Um, yeah. And